Hey everyone, welcome to part 106 of my Pokemon games series in Unity. So in this video, we'll refactor the code to use the item using the state stack architecture. So we'll make using item a separate state in our state stack, which we can push when the player selects an item and a Pokemon to use that item on. Alright, so let's look at how to implement this. You can support the making of this series by becoming a Patreon and get some cool rewards for it, like access to the complete project files of the series, exclusive tutorials that are not covered on YouTube, and access to the Discord community. So before we start, I want to say a huge thanks to all the Patreons who are currently supporting the channel. You guys make the series possible, and I'm grateful to each and every one of you. So let's start the video. So first, let's create a new state for using the item. So inside the game states, I'll create a new script called UseItem Okay, so let me get rid of the default code, and this class is going to be a state of the game controller. Okay, and we have to import the gd-utils.stateMachine namespace to use the state class. All right, so let me make the state a singleton so that we can access it from other states. All right, and I'll assign the instance from the awake. Okay, so next I'll override the enter function. So when we enter the state, we can run the code for using the item, right? So we already have the code for using the item in our inventory UI script. So here we have a function called UseItem for using the item. And this function also calls another function for handling DM and HM items. So let's copy these two functions to our UseItem state. I'll actually cut this because these functions are not needed in the inventory UI anymore. We can just comment the places from which these functions are called. Okay, so I'll just cut this and paste it in the UseItem state class. All right, and here we have lots of errors, so let's fix them one by one. So first of all, we don't have a substate machine here, so we can remove this statement. All right, and then we need access to the party screen and the inventory UI to get the item to use and the Pokemon on which we should use the item, right? So from this class, we need a reference to both party screen and inventory UI. Okay, so by using the party screen dot selected member property, we can get the selected Pokemon from the party screen. But we don't have a property like that in the inventory UI. Previously, we were using the inventory.getItem function, but we can't use that from here because we don't know the selected item and selected category variables. Okay, so let's create a property for that in the inventory UI. So here I'll create a public property called selected item. Okay, and we can get the selected item by calling the inventory.getItem function, right? So let me just copy this and put it over here. All right, so now from the use item state, to get the selected item, we can simply call inventory UI dot selected item. All right, so next we have few errors while we're using the item. And by the way, while we're here, let me just clean up this code a bit. So I only want to call the handle TM items if the item is a TM item. So From here, I'll check if the item is a TM item, and only then I want to call this function. Okay, and otherwise I'll execute the code to use the other types of items. Okay, so let me cut this code and paste it inside the else. All right, I'm just cleaning things up while we are here. So next we have an error here because we are calling the close party screen function. So we don't have to do that anymore because we are using a state stack architecture, right? So if we just pop the state, we will go back to the party state and then we can pop the party state. Okay. So here, instead of calling the close party screen function, I'll just pop the current state. Okay, we don't have access to the game controller yet. So let me cache a reference to the game controller from the enter function. All right. And now we can pop the current state from here. Okay. So there is also another area where we're calling the close party screen function. So here also I'll replace it with the pop function. All right. So next we have an error in this function that we're calling to use the item from the inventory. Okay. So first of all, we need a reference to the inventory. So we can cache a reference to it from the awake. Okay. So we can easily get the reference of the inventory by calling the static function called getInventory. All right. And now we have the inventory, but we still have an error because we don't have access to the selected item and selected category variable from the script. We only have the reference of the actual item, right? The selected item over here is an integer, which is the index of the item. We don't have access to that. So to fix this, what we can do is we can create an override of the UseItem function that takes the actual item instead of the item's index. Okay, so let me just copy this function and paste it over here. And in this function, I'll take the actual reference of the item instead of taking the index. Okay, and in that case, we don't need the category. We just need the item, right? So from this function, we don't have to call the getItem function because we already have the item. All right. So now we have two versions of the UseItem function. One version takes the index of the item and the other takes the item itself. Okay. So one thing to note here is when we create two versions of the same function, we end up with having same portion of code in both the functions, right? So that's not good because we don't want repeated code. So what I like to do is instead of writing this code, I'll just call this version of the UseItem function because this function contains the same code. Okay. So I'll just call the UseItem function and I'll pass the item and the selected Pokemon. Okay. And then we can just return the value of this function. All right. So that's much cleaner because we don't have code duplication. Okay. So now let's go ahead and use this function from our UseItem state. Okay, so here I'll pass the reference of the item and we don't have to pass the selected category. All right, so next we have an event here called onItemUsed. So I'll just get rid of this function. We'll be handling this in a different way. Okay, And next we have another error here because we don't have access to the selected category. So we can just expose the selected category from the inventory UI. So let me create a property here for a selected category. Okay. And I'll just expose the selected category variable. So now we can call inventory UI dot select category property to get the selected category. Okay, so all the errors in the use item function is fixed. So next we have some errors in the handle TM items function. So here again we can use the inventory UI dot selected item function to get the selected item. All right, and then we also have an error here. So this is a code for choosing a move to forget for learning a new move. Okay, so I'll just comment this for now. We'll be dealing with this later. All right, so now we have fixed all the errors and we have the function for using the item. So from the enter function of the state, we can go ahead and call the use item function. Okay, and that will use the item for us. So now from the party state, when we select a Pokemon for using the item on, we have to push the use item state, right? So from here, we can go ahead and push the use item state. Okay, but I don't want to just push the use item state like this. The reason is because once the use item state is complete, it'll come back to the party state, right? So when that happens, I want to push the party state immediately and go back to the inventory state. Okay, so that's how using items work. When we use an item like potion, then party screen will be the one that will be seeing. But as soon as we finish using the item, we'll go back to the inventory, right? So from here, as soon as the use item state is complete, I want to also pop the party state and go back to the inventory state. Okay, but the problem here is how can we know when the use item state is complete and we are back in the party state? So for that, what I like to do is I like to create a function called push and wait in the state machine. So this function will push a new state and wait until that state is complete and we are back in the current state. Okay, so that's how I like to handle these cases. So in the state machine, I'll create a new function called push and wait. Okay, so this will take a new state that we want to push. Okay, let me make this a void function. All right, so from this function, to push the state, we can simply call our push function. Okay, so from here I'll call the push function for pushing the new state, and then we also want to wait until this new state is complete and we are back in our current state, right? So to achieve that, first we need to keep track of the current state right now. So here I'll store the current state in a variable called old state. Okay, and when we push the new state, the current state will change to the new state, and after that we want to wait until the current state is back to the old state. Okay, so I'll achieve that by using the wait until coroutine. Okay, and we want to wait until the current state is equal to the old state. Okay, and by the way, since this function should wait, we have to make it a coroutine. So let me change the return type to IEnumerator. All right, so this function will push a new state and it'll wait until the new state is complete and we are back in our old state. Okay, so let's go ahead and call this function from the party state. So from here we can call push and wait instead of push. Okay, but since this is coroutine and since we want to wait until this is complete, we have to use a yield return. Okay, and in order to use yield return, we have to be in another coroutine, right? So I'll just put this in another coroutine called go to use item state. Okay, let me just copy this and paste it here. So when we call it like this, we will wait for the use item state to complete, and once that's complete, we will reach the next line, right? So when this happens, we want to pop the party state immediately and we want to go to the inventory state. Okay, so from here I'll call state machine.pop to pop the party state. All right, and now from here we can simply call the go to use item coroutine. Okay, so this should do the trick for us. And by the way, the push and wait state is also really useful for a lot of things that we are going to do in the future, because there will be a lot of cases where we want to push a state and then wait until it is complete. So this is all we have to do to use the item. So let's go to Unity and test this. Okay, so first we have to attach the use item state to the game controller. Okay, and here we have to assign the party screen and the inventory UI. And now let's try testing it. All right, so if I open up the bag and use an item like potion on one of our Pokemon, you can see that the use item state is being pushed. And in this case, this item won't have any effect, but still we can confirm that our code is working. Okay, so if you do some battles and lose some HP, then you'll be able to use the potion to recover the HP. Okay, so let's actually test some item that works. So I'll test an item like the HM cut and I'll try to teach it to my Bulbasaur. So yeah, you can see it is working. Bulbasaur learned cut. But if you try to teach it to a Pokemon who already has 4 moves, then right now nothing will happen because we did comment the code for achieving that. Okay, so we'll be handling this in the next video by converting the move to forget selection into a separate state in our state machine. All right, so I'll stop the video here. If you think this video is helpful, please leave a like and consider subscribing to my channel. That'll really help me out. So I'll see you in the next video.